Dean Martin was filming the biggest Western of his career when a stunt extra crashed to the ground hard and stayed down. What Dean did in the next 60 seconds didn't just halt production on a multi-million-dollar film. It transformed how Hollywood treated the people nobody cared about. And John Wayne, he witnessed it all and said Dean Martin just became the bravest man he'd ever known. July 1958. Old Tucson Studios in Arizona. The temperature was climbing past 112 degrees, the kind of heat that makes your eyeballs sweat. Dean Martin, John Wayne, and director Howard Hawks were deep into production on Rio Bravo, a Western that would become one of the greatest films ever made. But on July 23rd, something happened on that set that almost killed the entire production. Something that revealed who Dean Martin really was when the cameras weren't rolling. The movie business in 1958 was brutal, not the glamorous brutality you see on screen, but the real kind. The kind where studios treated human beings like replaceable parts in a machine, extras, stunt performers, crew members. They were invisible, disposable. If you got hurt, that was your problem. The show kept rolling, and you either got back up or you got replaced. Dean Martin had witnessed it his whole career. He'd watched people get chewed up and spit out by the Hollywood machine, but he'd never been in a position to do anything about it. He was a singer, an entertainer, a guy who showed up, hit his marks, collected his check, and went home. That's what everyone expected from Dean Martin. Show up looking cool, say your lines, don't cause trouble. But something was different about Rio Bravo. Maybe it was working with John Wayne, a man who commanded respect just by existing. Maybe it was the heat, the isolation, the intensity of the shoot. Or maybe Dean Martin had just reached a point in his life where he couldn't stay silent anymore. Whatever it was, July 23rd was the day Dean Martin stopped being just an entertainer and became something else entirely. The scene they were shooting was a bar fight, classic Western stuff, chairs breaking, bodies flying, the whole works. They'd hired about 30 stunt performers and extras to fill out the saloon. Most of them were local guys from Tucson, working for $75 a day. Good money in 1958. If you survived the day to collect it. One of those extras was a 34-year-old former rodeo rider named Tommy Mitchell. Tommy had been doing stunt work for about 5 years, picking up whatever jobs he could find. He had a wife, Sarah, and 2 little girls back in Tucson. He'd been thrilled to get hired on Rio Bravo. Working with John Wayne and Dean Martin, that was the kind of credit that could change a stuntman's career. Tommy's job that day was simple. During the bar fight, he was supposed to get thrown through a breakaway window, hit the ground outside, roll twice, and stay down. Easy stuff for a guy who'd been thrown off horses for a living. The breakaway window was made of sugar glass, designed to shatter safely on impact. Standard Hollywood trick, done 1,000 times on 1,000 different sets. But what Tommy Mitchell didn't know, what nobody on that set knew, was that the construction crew had made a mistake. The window frame that was supposed to be breakaway wood was actually reinforced with metal supports. Someone in the props department had grabbed the wrong frame that morning. It looked identical to the breakaway version, but it was built to last, not to break. The assistant director called action. The bar fight erupted. Bodies flew, chairs shattered, and right on cue, 2 stuntmen grabbed Tommy Mitchell and hurled him toward that window. Tommy hit the glass at full speed. The sugar glass shattered perfectly, exactly like it was supposed to. But the window frame didn't give. Instead of breaking away and letting Tommy sail through cleanly, the metal-reinforced frame caught him mid-flight like a clothesline. The sound was sickening, a wet crack that echoed across the desert silence. Tommy's body twisted in midair, and he dropped 12 feet straight down onto the hard-packed dirt outside the saloon set. He didn't roll. He didn't move. He just lay there motionless, dust settling around him like a shroud. The assistant director yelled, "Cut!" For about 3 seconds, the entire set was silent. Then everyone started moving at once. The stunt coordinator sprinted toward Tommy. The on-set medic grabbed his bag and ran. Crew members crowded around, and Dean Martin, still in full costume with stage blood on his shirt from the fight scene, pushed through the crowd to see what happened. Tommy Mitchell was conscious, but barely. His left arm was bent at an angle that arms aren't supposed to bend. Blood was pouring from a gash on his head. Worse, he wasn't moving his legs. The medic took one look and said the words everyone feared. "We need an ambulance now. This is serious." The production manager, a man named Gerald Foster, appeared out of nowhere. Foster was the studio's guy, the numbers man, the the one who made sure the film came in on budget and on schedule. He took one look at Tommy on the ground and said something that made Dean Martin's blood run cold. "Get him off my set. Put him in someone's car and take him to the hospital, and somebody find out who grabbed the wrong window frame. They're fired." That was it. No concern for Tommy. No questions about whether he'd be okay. Just, "Get him off my set," like he was a piece of broken equipment. The medic started to argue, saying Tommy shouldn't be moved until the ambulance arrived. But Foster cut him off. "We're losing light. Every minute we're not shooting costs this studio $10,000. Get him out of here and reset the scene." Dean Martin was standing right there. He heard every word, and something inside him snapped. Not the explosive kind of snap, the quiet kind, the dangerous kind. He walked over to Foster, his face calm, his voice low. "What hospital are they taking him to?" Foster barely looked at him. "Tucson General, I guess." "Why? Who's paying for it?" Foster finally looked at Dean. "That's not our problem. He signed a waiver. These guys know the risks. It's part of the job." Dean took a breath. "So the studio's not covering his medical bills?" "The studio provides on-set medical care. Anything beyond that is his responsibility. That's standard. Now, if you don't mind, we need to reset this scene." "Reset the scene without me." Foster's face went red. "Excuse me? You heard me. I'm not shooting another frame until I know that man's medical bills are covered." The entire set went quiet. Crew members stopped moving. John Wayne, who'd been in his trailer, emerged and stood at the edge of the scene, watching. Howard Hawks, the director, put down his script. Everyone sensed something big was happening. Foster tried to laugh it off. "Dean, come on, don't be dramatic. The guy signed a waiver. This is how it works." "Not anymore, it doesn't." Foster's smile disappeared. "You have a contract. You can't just refuse to work." Dean Martin took off his costume hat and handed it to a nearby crew member. "Watch me." Foster stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "You walk off this set and you'll never work in this town again. Do you understand what I'm saying? Warner Brothers will bury you. You'll be finished." Dean didn't flinch. "Then I guess I'm finished. But that man isn't going to go bankrupt because your construction crew screwed up." The silence on that set was absolute. In 1958, actors didn't challenge studios like this. Studios had absolute power. If they wanted to destroy your career, they could. One phone call to every major studio in Hollywood, and you'd never see the inside of a sound stage again. Dean Martin knew this. Everyone knew this. But Dean didn't move. He just stood there, arms crossed, staring at Foster with eyes that said he meant every word. Howard Hawks cleared his throat. "Gerald, maybe we should discuss this." Foster spun toward Hawks. "We're not discussing anything. He's under contract. He works, or he's in breach." Hawks, one of the most respected directors in Hollywood, took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly. "Gerald, I've been making pictures for 30 years. I've never seen anyone refuse to work because someone got hurt. Dean's making a point here, and maybe it's a point worth hearing." Foster's jaw tightened. "With all due respect, Mr. Hawks, this is a business decision, not a creative one." "Everything on a film set is a creative decision," Hawks replied, "including whether the people who work for us can afford to live after they work for us." John Wayne had been silent through all of this, just watching. Now he stepped forward. "I agree with Dean." Foster stared at him. "Mr. Wayne, that man got hurt on our set. The studio should take care of him. Dean's right." Foster looked around at the crew, at the equipment, at the millions of dollars sitting idle. He did the math in his head. Dean Martin refusing to work was bad. John Wayne backing him up was catastrophic. If this became a public scandal about how the studio treated injured workers, the damage would be catastrophic. Foster pulled out a handkerchief and wiped his face. "I need to make a call." He disappeared into the production office. Dean Martin didn't move. He just stood there, arms crossed, waiting. The crew didn't reset the scene. Nobody moved. The entire production was frozen, tens of thousands of dollars burning away with every minute that passed, but nobody cared. Something bigger than money was happening. 20 minutes later, Foster emerged from the office. His face was carefully neutral. "Warner Brothers will cover Mr. Mitchell's medical expenses, all of them, and we'll be reviewing our insurance policies for the entire crew." Dean didn't smile, didn't celebrate. He just nodded. "I want that in writing today. You'll have it by end of business. And I want to know Tommy's condition before we shoot another frame." Foster hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. Dean turned to the crew. Anybody here want to keep working under these conditions? Speak up now, because if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. Nobody else gets hurt and left behind. Nobody spoke up. They didn't need to. The answer was written on every face. Howard Hawks cleared his throat. All right then, let's take the rest of the day. Give everyone a chance to cool down. We'll resume tomorrow morning. As the crew began to disperse, John Wayne pulled Dean aside. That was the gutsiest thing I've ever seen. You know you just made yourself a target, right? The studios are going to remember this. Dean shrugged. Then they remember it. I'm tired of pretending I don't see what's happening to people. Wayne studied him for a moment, then extended his hand. You're all right, Martin. You're really all right. That night, Dean Martin went to Tucson General Hospital. Tommy Mitchell was in surgery. His wife Sarah was in the waiting room, terrified, clutching a hospital bill estimate that would have bankrupted their family. Dean sat down next to her. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm Dean Martin. I was there when your husband got hurt. Sarah looked up at him, her eyes red from crying. Is he going to be okay? The doctors are doing everything they can, but I need you to know something. Warner Brothers is paying for everything. Every penny. Surgery, rehab, lost wages, everything. You don't have to worry about the money. Sarah stared at him, not comprehending. What? How? Because what happened to your husband wasn't his fault, and it's not right that you should suffer for it. Sarah broke down crying, not from fear this time, but from relief. Dean stayed with her until Tommy came out of surgery. 3 hours sitting in an uncomfortable plastic chair, drinking bad coffee, just being there, because nobody else from the production was. Tommy Mitchell survived. The surgery repaired most of the damage to his arm, though he never regained full mobility. His back healed, and he could walk again, though with a limp. He never did stunt work again. But Warner Brothers paid his medical bills, all $18,000 of them, and 6 months later, they hired him as a stunt coordinator, a position where he could use his experience without risking his body. Rio Bravo resumed production the next day. Dean Martin was quieter than usual, but he was there. John Wayne watched him differently now, with respect, with something close to reverence. And the crew? They'd have walked through fire for Dean Martin after that, not because he was a star, because he'd stood up when it mattered. The studio did try to retaliate. Dean's next 3 film offers were mysteriously withdrawn. Projects he was supposed to be attached to suddenly went to other actors. The blacklist was real. But Dean Martin had something the studio hadn't counted on. He had John Wayne's loyalty. He had Howard Hawks telling everyone in Hollywood what really happened on that set. And he had a crew that spread the word. Within 6 months, the story of what Dean Martin did on the Rio Bravo set had become legend in Hollywood. Not in the press, the studios made sure of that, but among the people who actually made movies, the grips, the gaffers, the stunt performers, the extras, Dean Martin became something more than a star. He became a hero. In 1959, the Screen Actors Guild pushed through new insurance requirements for productions. Studios were required to carry comprehensive coverage for all performers, including extras and stunt workers. The change was directly influenced by what happened on Rio Bravo. Dean Martin never took credit for it, but everyone knew. Tommy Mitchell kept in touch with Dean for the rest of Dean's life. Every Christmas, Dean would get a card from Tommy and Sarah and their daughters. And every Christmas, Dean would call them, not for publicity, not for show, just because he cared. When Dean Martin died in 1995, Tommy Mitchell was at the funeral. He was 71 years old by then, walking with a cane, his arm still slightly crooked from that day in the Arizona heat. A reporter asked him what Dean Martin meant to him. Tommy looked at the reporter and said, Dean Martin saved my life. Not just that day on the set, my whole life. He taught me that you don't have to be powerless just because someone tells you you are. He showed me that standing up for what's right matters more than keeping your job. The reporter pressed him. But he was a big star. It was easy for him to take that risk. Tommy shook his head. No, it wasn't easy. He risked everything that day, and he did it for me. A guy he didn't know. A guy who didn't matter to anyone except my family. That's not a big star move. That's a good man move. And Dean Martin was a good man. The story of Rio Bravo is usually told as a classic Western. John Wayne in his prime, Howard Hawks directing, Dean Martin showing he could act, not just sing, and all of that is true. But there's another story buried in that film, a story that didn't make it into the press kits or the promotional materials, a story about what happened when a man with power decided to use it for something other than himself. Dean Martin stopped a production on July 23, 1958. He risked his career, his reputation, and his future. He stared down a studio executive and refused to back down. And he did it for a man he'd never met. A stunt extra named Tommy Mitchell who hit the ground wrong and whose life would have been destroyed by medical bills. That's not just a good story. That's a blueprint for how to be human. That's a reminder that fame and fortune mean nothing if you don't use them to protect the people who can't protect themselves. Dean Martin wasn't a crusader. He wasn't a revolutionary. He was just a guy who saw something wrong and refused to pretend he didn't see it. Rio Bravo became one of the greatest westerns ever made. But the real heroism on that set happened off camera, in a moment when Dean Martin chose principle over profit, when he chose a stranger's welfare over his own career, when he stood up and said, "Not on my watch." And the crew that was there that day, they never forgot. They told their children, their grandchildren. The story spread through Hollywood like wildfire. Not in the newspapers, not on television, but in the places where real people worked, the places where being decent mattered more than being famous. Dean Martin made a lot of movies. He sang a lot of songs. He made millions of people laugh and cry and feel something. But on July 23, 1958, in the brutal Arizona heat, on a Western set that almost killed a man, Dean Martin did something more important than entertain anyone. He stood up, he spoke up, and he refused to let the machine grind up another human being. That's the Dean Martin story that should be told. Not the cool guy with the martini glass, not the Rat Pack singer with the effortless charm, the man who stopped a movie set and said, "Fix this or I walk." The man who risked everything for a stranger. Because that's not just courage, that's character. Disclaimer. This is a fictionalized dramatization inspired by real events and public figures. All dialogue and specific events are created for commentary and educational purposes. This work is not intended as defamation, but examines themes of standing up for others, workplace justice, and using power responsibly. Names, characters, and incidents have been used in a fictional context.